Hi, my name is Heather. Welcome to the Knits and Things podcast. Today is Monday, July 7th, 2014, and this is episode 30, and I'm going to title this one a bit different because I'm going to very quickly go over what I've been working on, but I've been very limited in what I've been doing, and then I'm going to finally do the needle review information segment that was asked for a bit, actually a good bit ago, by one of the members on the Ravelry group. So things are a bit different today. Just go with it. If you're looking for me online, I am Heather219 on Instagram and Ravelry, and those are my main places to be online. I am on Facebook, and I've kind of reserved that for personal friends, people I actually do know, and family, but I'm a little ticked off with Facebook right now, so I haven't been using it. Did you guys hear this whole thing? So I try to be responsible every once in a while and listen to the news radio program when I'm driving shorter distances where I don't want to listen to a book or a podcast. So there's been this story circulating lately on a regular news channel, so I'm assuming it's not speculation, that Facebook, for the longest time, was conducting a psychological experiment on all Facebook users. So this is the story I heard. I hadn't planned on talking about this, so I hope I don't get it screwed up. This is what I heard. They controlled what people were seeing. They either gave them all happy, upbeat stories to see what they would say their mood was. I don't know if it was when you checked in or if they were actually going in and monitoring your posts and what you said, which if they're conducting experiments, why wouldn't they be monitoring exactly what you said? Or they gave you horrible stories, sad stories, depressing stories to see what kind of mood you would be in after reading this in your feed. So they controlled what was going into your feed and were monitoring your moods. Which is a psychological experiment. You can't do that shit. I mean, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to get people's consent if you want to do that kind of thing. And so I think that's very unethical. And I can't say that I haven't been using Facebook because now I'm used to going on there and checking on people. But I've definitely been a little more standoffish on Facebook in the since over the weekend. I think I heard the story just before the 4th of July. So I've just about had it. So Instagram and Ravelry. You can control what you see on there, right? Anyway, so I'm Heather219. So there is also a group on the Ravelry boards, or there is a board for the Ravelry. Let me start again. There's a board on Ravelry for the group where you can participate and do things. There's nothing really going on right now. I said last week that I was going to start up a little contest, and I think I still am, but it's going to be more of kind of just a sharing thing. I don't think it's going to be a contest. So hopefully I'll remember to talk about that later in the next couple of minutes because I'm going to talk about what I'm working on. So finished objects. I do have something finished, and I'm not going to do segments this week or anything because everything is so different. And I don't even know. I tried to think of a new name for my new information segment, and I've been thinking about other things. So, thing one. This is thing one. And I'm going to start with what's finished. I'm trying to be very gentle, though, because I did finish the Lizzie cardigan, but it's still a little damp, and it's knit out of cotton, so I don't want to mess with it. I'm definitely not putting it on, and I'm going to try and be very gentle when I'm holding it up because you know how cotton stretches, which I thought... So I've always been calling this my cropped Lizzie. If you look on my pattern page or my projects pages, I call it my cropped Lizzie because I had planned on stopping it about mid-waist so that it would be more of a cropped cardigan, which is what I thought I was doing, but you know how cotton is, so it has stretched out to its full length. So this is the cardigan. I've got it in half here. And so the cardigan starts out stockinette for the neckline and the sleeve tops. And then there's a little bit of a cable that it goes into. And the cable is where I stopped for the sleeve. The cable also goes down the bodice, or starts down the bodice. And then it morphs into a lace pattern. Isn't that pretty? And so the lace goes all the way down to the hem. And then you have a stockinette rolled edge that you put on it. And so it's very pretty. I think it turned out beautiful, just like I was hoping. Again, it's a little longer than I thought it was going to be, but I think it's going to be gorgeous and very versatile and very useful. So that is Lizzie, and Lizzie is finished. Viagante is not finished. So Lizzie was the only thing I finished this week. Viagante is not finished. I'm not even going to show it because it looks like a big black blob, just like it did last time. I am working on another barn raising square for my sock blanket, and I'm sticking with the pinks theme because this is the one, these are the squares that I'm doing for my blanket in general, but I'm going to enter them in the pink along, knit along that my Yarn Snob group is doing. And so here is this one. This is an Into the World colorway. I don't remember the colorway name, and it's got a fair bit of pink in it, so that one is going in, but I haven't worked on that one much lately either. And then I started 2 new things. So, Camp Loopy Project 2 started for July, and I am knitting a sweater for my nephew. Let me grab that, because it's just out of reach. Okay, so I'm trying not to bump anything and shake everything around. Sorry if the camera's moving. So, Camp Loopy Project 2 is going to be a sweater for my nephew, because I'm trying to stick with gifts for my Camp Loopy, since I really have no business buying yarn. So I am knitting a pattern called Gaspard Legrand, which is a pattern originally written in French, and it's even the people that on Ravelry that said that they speak French, people that bought it in the French version, said that it's a little confusing and it takes a little bit of thinking. Like, you have to read the instructions or read the next direction in the pattern and go, okay, what does she mean? How is that going to translate into a sweater? Okay, I think I got it. So it's, the directions are there and I'm following them, but not after a little bit of pausing. Not without a little bit of pausing. So this sweater is being knit in Cascade Ultra Pima. I don't have any, I've wound up all the skeins and I don't have one of the tags sitting out is what I'm looking for. I can take it out of the middle of this skein because I'm about to start this skein. So it's Cascade Ultra Pima. And on here, there's just a color number. It's 3797. But on the Loopy U website, it was called like Deep Surf or something like that. It's definitely a very watery colorway. So here is the beginning of the sweater. So it starts with, you start bottom up, and it's knit in one piece. So I'm gonna knit starting with the bottom of the front, knit up the front, and then around the back. So it'll get seamed together just down the sides, and then I think when you pick up for the arms, I believe you do them in the round, but I'm not sure. So you have a little bit of garter stitch at the bottom, a stockinette body, and then I've just separated for the neck, which is that little bit, and then the fronts, which is this. And I'm assuming that the purpose of this reverse stockinette is for when you pick up around the collar, but don't quote me because there is a sailor collar on this. It's a very cute little sweater. If you get a chance, go to my project page and click on the link, Gaspard Legrand. Very, very cute. There's for the armholes, I think the shaping there, and the little decreases there just show up very nicely. Not so nicely on the slip knit side. Looks better on the knit two together side, but very cute. I really like this yarn. It's very nice and smooth. I did have to go way down. So when I got this yarn, I was concerned about the gauge, but it measured out to gauge using a size 5 needle, and here's my gauge swatch. Using a size 5 needle, I got gauge. Well, when I cast on the sweater to begin with, I started the garter stitch and I was knitting back and forth, and I thought, this is really wide, because my nephew is 16 months old, so I figured a 2T would be a little bit cutting it close, like he wouldn't get as much use out of it, so I wanted to knit the next size up, which actually goes into the children's size. So the pattern, Gaspard Legrand, is written in 2 sizes, one for babies and young toddlers, and one for like a big kid size. It starts with size 4 through size 10. So this is actually, I'm knitting for the size 4, number 1, because he's a big kid and he's growing, and eventually he's going to need a sweater those sizes, where he won't need a 2T size as much, or a 24-month size as much. and the other was to get the yardage for the Camp Loopy project. But when I was knitting the size 4, and it said that it should be, I forget how many centimeters across, but it was a reasonable amount for a toddler. But when I knitted the garter, this garter stitch section with the size 5 needle, it was wide enough to go across, halfway across me, and I'm not a small woman, and I'm a grown-up, so clearly it was going to be too big. So I've gone down to now a size 3 needle. So I'm getting a much different gauge. So this is a size 3. I'm getting a much different gauge, but the measurements are more reasonable for a toddler. So this being half of a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, wonderful. Before, not so wonderful. It would have gone around him 2 or 3 times. He would have been wearing it until he was in college. So Gaspard Legrand, very cute pattern. I'm really liking it, and I think it's going to go pretty quickly. I've been working pretty much exclusively on this, and I'm finishing up the front of the sweater now. So I would say by Wednesday I'll be doing the back, if nothing else goes wrong. So that is what one of the things I'm knitting on. And then this is what I wanted to talk about last week and just completely slipped my mind. I watch a couple different podcasts. I watch Knit One Heart Two, and I know that Wendy is doing does little creatures every once in a while. She actually has like a little mushroom boy and mushroom girl that she does, or that she's doing currently, that are so cute. Oh my goodness, but I don't crochet, and to learn to crochet and to do all that, I think is a bit much. I love knitting. I'm just going to stick with knitting and go with it. And I watch the Traveling Sock Knitter, who is a college professor, and she is knitting monsters to go in her personal office. But I was thinking I want to do animals for my classroom. So this is the little backstory for this. So what happened was, I, being the thrifty, crafty person that I am, saw that a neighbor of my ex-husband was getting rid of a bookshelf type thing that goes in a classroom or a library, where you can sit the books, you can set the books down. Do I have a book out? No. Where you can set the books down and you can see the cover, you can see the front of the book, which is a very good idea for children because they don't really understand about the spine of a book, and their books are kind of skinny, so seeing the spine of a book is not as enticing to them as seeing the cover, where the picture is going to drag them in and the title is going to drag them in. So I wanted one of those. What I usually do is, with my library in my old classroom, I would, all the books would be on the shelf, and then because the shelf was small, was maybe, to me it's like at hip level, which is pretty much eye level with them, or just below, I would set a couple books up on top, that way where they could see the covers. But I saw this bookshelf being pitched in my ex's neighborhood one day when I went to pick up my son, and I told him, I'm like, next time you come over, I'm like, bring that with you. Bring that, when you drop him off, because I want it in my classroom. So we actually brought it home, and it sat outside of my house, thank goodness. And then my dad brought it to my classroom on a Monday morning. So it probably was like a Friday or something, or a Wednesday or Friday that it was dropped off outside my house. My dad brought it to my classroom. Anyway, that's not the important part. The important part is, the day after we brought it into my classroom, I set it in front of a shelf full of stuffed animals that I already had in my classroom. And the very next day, I noticed that on top of the shelf where the stuffed animals were, there were a bunch of little critter droppings. And I'm thinking that the bookshelf was full of roaches. So I told the maintenance guys from my building what happened, and they came in while the kids were gone and put traps out while the kids were there, and then over the weekend sprayed. So, but my fear was that all of those stuffed animals now had critters in them. Or if not critters, they had the remains of critters or droppings of critters, and I didn't let my children use them for the rest of the time. Actually, I threw the stuffed animals away. And there were a lot. I had probably 25, 30 stuffed animals. Because I always get them, if you shop at Kohl's, do you have a Kohl's near you? They have books and stuffed animals that go along with the books near the registers a lot. 2 or 3 times a year they go through and have different books and different animals. And I would always pick up 2 or 3 of the animals Some were from when my son was little, and I took them and put them in the classroom when he didn't use them anymore. Things like that. I think there might have been one Webkins in there. I had animals, and what they would do is they would read to the animals. So now I need to replace them, and I was dreading having to buy all the animals again. So I was thinking, I have all this yarn. I know how to knit. Let's just make stuffies. So coincidentally, Diane of Knittables also does stuffies every once in a while, and I think it was last year, Valentine's-ish maybe, or maybe 2 years ago at Valentine's Day, she had the Voodoo You Love Me little doll, and I bought that pattern then. Well, she's now doing a knit along for that designer's patterns, who has a bunch of little creatures, and a couple different garments. I think there's like a pair or two of fingerless mitts and maybe a scarf or hat or something. But so she's doing a knit along for that designer, and since I don't want to spend any money on patterns, I'm going to do Voodoo You Love Me first. So here's the beginning of Voodoo You Love Me. This is just the little body. Very cute. So it's a little pouch right now. And then I'm going to stuff it with some polyfill. This is from the last time I knit animals. I stole this from my mother. So I'm just going to keep using that same batting. And I'll probably I told her I'd give her the money to buy a new thing of batting. Because I'll probably just use that for all the ones that I knit. So there's the beginning. I'm ready now to stuff that. I had to locate the batting first. I'm ready to stuff the body and then finish the body and give him or her, whoever, a head. And I'm going to try and disguise the fact that this is a voodoo doll. So I'm going to give it 2 normal eyes and eyelids and a smile and everything. But I think it's still not going to have any hair. Or I might give it, I saw one on the pattern page that had a little mohawk. Very cute. So this is going to be the first stuffy. And so what I had intended to bring up to everybody last week was, do you knit stuffies? And if you do, what are some patterns that you recommend that would be cute in a classroom? So I went through and did a search in Ravelry, because Ravelry is wonderful. I did a search in Ravelry for free, because I don't want to spend a ton of money, free animals that were knitted. And I think I also put in a star rating, like 4 or 5 stars. So I have some that are in there, but now, I mean, that's still, when I set out all those different parameters, all those different search parameters that had to be met, I still came up with like 5 pages full of stuff. So what I would like to know is what animals you knit. And so I think I'm just going to open a thread that's about animals and sharing patterns, because I would like to knit a couple more animal patterns this summer so that I have a good bit to go in to start the school year with, and then I'll just keep knitting until my little stash of yarn is done. And so what I would like to do is I would like to knit in worsted weight, or well, around worsted weight, maybe like DK at the least. Because I don't want teeny small animals. What I want is, so Blue is going to my classroom as well, which is why Blue is here, and Blue never went to the classroom. Blue has been there since I bought her, because I don't want her going to the classroom and getting all messed up. Or is Blue he? Blue is a he, right? Yes, because the girl he meets in the actual jungle is a girl. Okay, so the kids hold on to the animal and read to it, or they sit the animal in front of them and they pretend they're me, and they read the book and then they turn it around so that the animal can see the book. So I want them to be, animal size. The Voodoo You Love Me is going to be a little bit smaller. So I think if this is her body, then her head. So the Voodoo You Love Me might be maybe this tall from the neck down. But I want, I want substantial sized animals. I don't want any minis. I don't want any like the teenies, which I was looking at. This same designer did, I think the same designer as the Voodoo You Love Me did the little noodle. Do you watch Stockinette Zombies? And they knit the little noodle dogs. If you do that in a worsted weight, you get a bigger size. So most of them translate into, depends on which yarn you use, how big or small it's going to get. So I kind of would like to see what everybody else does. What animals do you knit? What animal patterns do you recommend? They can be whatever. They can be pay-for patterns, or they can be free patterns. I would like the free patterns a little better. But so just to kind of share and to see and to get some feedback from actual people, what do you knit when you want to knit a stuffy, or what stuffy patterns have you tried before and liked? So that's a thread that I'm going to open up in the group just for sharing and camaraderie. So I think that is it for thing 1. Yes, let's move on to thing 2 very quickly so I can still talk about needles. So thing 2 is spinning, and it is, oh my goodness, Tour de Fleece time. So, and I've been watching the tour. I actually have an app on my phone, but I have no problem being in such a high population area. I have no problem finding the tour on our cable channels. But I do have an app that will show me if I miss it during the day. I do have an app that will show me. I think it's called Live Extra, and it's for NBC. And it runs all sorts of sporting events live. And you can also, if it's something that you have flagged, you can go back and watch the live recording at a later time, which is what I did for the beginning of the tour because we were out running around on Saturday. So yeah, it's Tour de Fleece time to go along with the Tour de France, and I am knitting with the Fat Cat Knits team, and I'm also checking in with the Sasquatch team. I have very loose goals, but with the time that I've been putting in, I think I very easily will make even more than what my goal was. So each day my goal is to just spin for 15-20 minutes while I watch the tour. I originally said 15 minutes, but it's been more like 20 minutes because it's so soothing. And when I take a break from spinning, when I go back to it, I think, why don't I do this more often? And then about 2 or 3 days into it, my hand starts to get really overtired, and I go, oh, that's why. So I'm trying, like today I spun and I limited myself. When my timer went off for 15 minutes, I stopped. I started a new bobbin, and then I stopped. So first up on the bobbins is a Fat Cat Knits braid, a 6-ounce Fat Cat Knits braid. This 2 ounces was done before the tour though. But this bobbin shows you a little bit more of the colors. So this colorway is called Frog and Carp, and it's all rainbowy. It starts with blue, which is, there are some really dark blue portions, so it goes definite full rainbow. Blue, or the royally violet color, to the blue, to the green, down to yellow, and then to the yellow kind of morphs into an orange and red. And it ends with the red. So I don't have the last 2 ounces is on the bobbin, is on the wheel rather, and I didn't want to break it to bring it up here. But that is definitely rainbow, and the goal is to 3-ply this together. When you look at this, it looks very uneven, but if you'll notice, on this bobbin, I never, even on the small end, I never took it all the way out to the edge. And on this bobbin I did. This bobbin goes way out to the edge, which is why you still see the blue there and not there. So it looks like I should be concerned that they won't match up, but I think they will because I'm trying to be really consistent. That's one of the things that I don't do very well, but it looks pretty consistent to me for width and thickness of the yarn. So the third, like I said, the third 2 ounces is on the bobbin. That'll probably be finished in a day or two. And I might stop and do some Turkish spindling for one day and let them all rest before I ply them up. So this is going to be a 3-ply, again trying for a gradient so I can do another Zuzu's petals with the gradient. And I'm hoping that this will be a little bit lighter weight than the original. The original was very bulky. So I'm trying this again. And that one braid plus this braid was all I had planned on spinning, but when I was rearranging my stash the other day when I was looking for the yarn for my animals, I came across another. So this colorway is called Leilani, which I love the colors, and I also had a student named Leilani last year, and this is like soft and sweet and cute just like she was. So I think this is going to be really fun to spin. And this is a Corriedale cross, and it's only 4 ounces. But it is a gradient as well. I love getting gradients from Jenny from Fat Cat Knits. They just, they turn out so wonderful. And I'm about to spin this, so I'm going to show you what the gradient means. I'm going to open it up and show you. So a gradient means that the colors go from one color at one end of the braid into another color, into a middle color, and then back out again. So that when you spin it, ideally you'll get blocks of color that follow the same pattern like that. And so when you open it up, you will have, and have you ever seen a braid get unwound? Not everybody does this, but Ginny does. So then when I do this, and this one I'm going to try for a 2-ply, the braid starts and stops with the brown, and then it goes into peachy corally beautifulness, and then into the blue. So that will be, this is a 4-ounce braid, and that will be, I'll probably try and do this one as a 2-ply. If I thought I was going to be really good, I might try Andean plying, which is a way of getting this braid to ply back on itself rather than having to split it into 2 bobbins and do that. So it's a different way of spinning. And I have an Andean plying tool that I use because Andean plying, I first learned Andean plying when I was just spindling, and you wrap it around your hand a certain way, almost like in a cross type position, but it can get very, you can cut off your circulation that way, especially if you're trying to put a whole bobbin. I would never try and put 4 ounces on my hand, but there's a tool called Handy Andy, which is an Andean plying tool. It's a piece of wood, 2 pieces of wood really, that go down together, and so that you can wrap the yarn around that way and Andean ply. But the easiest way to do a 2-ply is to do the 2 bobbins. So not quite sure exactly how I'll do that, but this I'm thinking is going to be a 2-ply just to make sure that I get the yardage that I would like. But so that's beautiful, and that is Fat Cat Knits. And then the one that I found, this is another 6-ounce portion, and this is a Polworth braid, and this colorway is called Buster, and it's a gradient as well. And this one you can see goes from purple into a little bit of tan, and then into a tealy green blue again, and then into yellow. And this one I had done up thinking of doing gifts because yellow is not really my color, so I think this was intended to be a gift, probably for my sister with the purple. So Jennifer, if you're watching, shh, act surprised. So this is hers, and I actually have my sister in mind a lot lately for knits because she started a new job and she works at a hospital that is apparently freezing. And she comes home every day. She drives home. It takes her probably 30 minutes to get here to pick up her son. It takes her about 30 minutes to get here from her office, and she still has on a scarf inside her hot car because she's been freezing cold all day. So my mom and I have been thinking about what we can knit for her. So if that works out well, I might try to see with that 6 ounces if I can get enough yardage for a, I want to do a brickless for her. I think she would really like that. So that is all my knitting and spinning. And now I'm going to talk a little bit, here's the new part. I'm going to talk a little bit about needles. So a while ago, someone recommended, or someone suggested, hey, would you please talk about needles, the needles you like, and what goes into your thought process when you choose a needle for a project. That's what I'm going to do today. So, when I choose a needle, I go to my closet, and I was gifted this a long time ago. I used to be in lots of swaps, and someone gave me this because I said that I really didn't have a way to organize my needles. And in fact, I used to just kind of roll them up and tuck them away in the little cabinet behind me. I used to just tuck them on the side. So this now is the way I hold my needles. And if you'll notice, they're all circular. This is actually called the circular solution. And I usually use circular needles for everything. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a little while. But circular needles are my go-to. That's what I usually prefer. You can do anything on a circular needle. Pretty much. There are maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. Well, yeah, there's really 1 or 2 exceptions, and that's it. So I normally use circular needles for everything. I have a lot of the little sizes for socks. In fact, this is not all of them because I have a lot of sock projects going right now, or things that require sock sizes, like my barn raising squares are in size 3s. And I have at least 3 pairs of socks in progress. So those are probably on 2s, and if you'll notice, I still have a 2 here. So I have lots of 2s and lots of 1s because I'm starting to realize the value of knitting socks on a very dense gauge to make them last longer. So all of my needles tend to be circular. In the past, I have not been very picky about what brand of needle I use. You'll see some knit picks in there. The smaller knit picks I've noticed do not have the cable problem that the bigger sizes do. So I do still have a couple of sock sizes in the knit picks. I tried out the ones from China that you can order that are a lot like Haya, which is actually my current favorite. But I'm not above the, where did they just go? Susan Bates from the, big box stores. And actually for a long time, my favorites were the Takumi Clovers, which is another big box brand. It's the Clover Takumis. I actually like this needle a lot. If I definitely want to use wood because I don't want to take a chance on them slipping, if I'm using a more slippery yarn like the cotton, Clover Takumi is what I'm going to use. I'm not that picky. And Clover even has lately, my sister likes these. I don't like these. Have you ever seen anybody knit? I think Cherie from Kirby Warby says that she knits her socks on the little teeny 9-inch circular needles. So this is basically a sock needle, which is the only purpose for this. And this, I believe, is a Clover. Yep, and it's a size 2. So that's what that one is for. And so I have a couple of those, and I tried them. I tried one wood and one metal just to make sure that it wasn't the material of the needle that I didn't like, and it's the teeny size of what you hold on to, because I feel like I'm knitting just on my fingertips the whole time. And I like for the shaft of the needle to come down into my hand a little more as I'm knitting so that it rests. So, and that's really the only consideration I put into the needle. I do not mind the little Chinese versions. I do not mind the knit picks other than the fear of the cable popping out. And I don't know where I just got that one from. I think that's a 7, but I'm not sure. I do not mind the wood of the Clover Takumis. In fact, I usually think about which needle based on the yarn that I'm using and what the project is going to be. So, for example, when I started my Lizzie cardigan, which is the finished object that I just did. Oh, my needle just dropped. The finished object that I just did. When I started out, I was actually using this needle exactly. It's one of my favorites, size 5 Clover, and it was fine. When I got down to the point after I had the sleeves and everything on, it got to be a little tight on here. So once I took everything off and needed to pick back up around the whole neckline and the back of the sweater and had all of those stitches on, I picked up with a Haya, which is now my new favorite, the Haya Steel, which look a lot like the Chinese needles. Let me show you the difference. Or show you how similar they are, really. So this is a Haya, and this is a Chinese needle. They look a lot alike. I think this is a size 7 and this is a size 6, but they look a lot alike. This one might even be a 5. The tips are very similar. The shaft is about the same length. The difference is at the end. So this is the Chinese needle, and see how it's got that extra little bit, that extra little hook to it at the end there? And then it goes down to a thicker, stiffer cable. Okay? And this is the Haya, which stops there and then goes down to a thinner, very pliable cable, which is why I like these, because I tend to do circular needles for everything, so a lot of times I'm magic looping. Especially if it's any kind of circular project, I'm magic looping. If it's something that needs to just go back and forth, then the pliable cable is very willing to stretch back across the project and start knitting back with no resistance. And some of the other cables, like the Chinese cable, not so much. As a matter of fact, magic looping with these is a little difficult because of how stiff the cable is. So you can see a big difference in how pliable the cable is. But I like the Haya Haya so much, I think, because it is shiny, but not quite so shiny that things slip off like they do with, I'm looking for an Addy Turbo. I'm knitting my nephew's sweater on an Addy Turbo. And the Addy Turbo is a very slick, shiny metal, which is why I believe it's called Turbo, because this is very slick and shiny and very, very slick, where this is more of a brushed aluminum and it's not as slick. So the Haya Haya I'm claiming right now is my favorite needle, although I did notice, even with the brushed surface to it, the brushed feel to it, that it still slipped a lot more on the cotton of my Lizzie cardigan than the wood did. So I started the Lizzie on the wood, on the clover needles, and it was fine. You know, I had no problem. But I did notice when I went to the Haya Haya, well, this is the Chinese version. When I went to the Haya Haya, that the cotton yarn still slipped around on this one a little bit more, and my hands had to overcompensate for that, and my hands got very tired knitting the Lizzie cardigan, even on the brushed surface of the Haya Haya. So a lot of what I do when I have to choose a yarn, or when I have to choose a needle for a project, I think about the yarn and I think about what the project is going to be. Because if it's something very solid, that would have a lot to do with which needle I chose. If it was a slippery yarn, that would have a lot to do with what needle I chose. So if I was using a yarn that I was concerned was going to be a little more slippery, had a little more very smooth fibers, more man-made fibers like cotton or linen or something, I would try and stay away from a metal needle, and I would gravitate towards a wooden needle. So I would first look, you know, when I go to my needle selection, I would first look at the size that I needed, and I'd look to see if I had a wooden needle. If I didn't have a wooden needle, I might see if I do have some plastic left. Isn't that crazy? I think this might be the only plastic one that I have left, but I do have a little plastic size 6 that I like. It's very useful for hats. I think I bought this when I very first started knitting, and it's the craziest thing. It's got a short needle, but it's got a flat cable to it. Isn't that weird? But it works good for hats, so I keep it around. So the fabric that I'm knitting, or the yarn is one consideration, but the fabric that I'm knitting is another thing. So yarn choice, then fabric. If I'm knitting something lacy, sometimes it's kind of hard to do depending on the size needle that you're knitting with. If you're knitting on, say you're going to do like a lacy shawl or a lacy scarf, and you need like a size 8 or 9 that is a thicker diameter needle. Sometimes if you're knitting something lacy, as the knitting slides off of the main part of the needle and onto the much thinner cable, transferring the stitches back or transferring the stitches around as you're knitting circularly, sometimes it could catch on the edge of the needle, which is another reason to go with a higher quality needle like a Haya Haya or an Addy Turbo that's made just for lace and things like that. It's because they pay closer attention to the joins. If I was doing a lace project on something, on a big needle like this, your stitches are going to catch as they slide back around to go onto the needle to be knit again, or to transfer everything around if it's a circular knit. And I don't like that. I feel like the stitches get mangled, the stitches get a little bit more manhandled when you're knitting that way. So I would be cautious of that, which is the only reason lace, or possibly even cables. Cables will do the same thing, because you've got stitches going in all different directions. So if I'm doing something lace work, or if I'm doing something with cables, my go-to needle of choice in that case is going to be a straight wooden needle, as long as it's not a circular project. So if you were knitting a straight lace scarf, which I have one on the needles somewhere downstairs, or if you're knitting a straight cabled scarf, then my needle of choice is, again, I go back to the Clover Takumi's, and I get just one of the straight, short wooden needles. Those are my favorites, and I have several pairs of those in like size 5, 6, 7 for doing lace scarves. But I did find at one time, I have a project to show you, a work in process project that I need to get back to because it's beautiful, that I actually borrowed from my mother some old-fashioned aluminum needles, and it was a big size. It's a size 10 that I needed, or that I wanted, and so I didn't have a size 10, and I didn't feel like buying any at that time, so I went and got these from her because I have a little cabled cowl that I'm knitting. And again, this is cables, so you know, you can kind of tell on the back side, the stitches, when you're doing a cable, the stitches are wrapping over each other, and they're being, you know, the order of the stitches is being reversed, and it's very tricky to slide that kind of stuff between a thick needle, which a size 10 is, and a thin cable. So I'm knitting this on aluminum. Maybe this is why I stopped, because the aluminum, and they're huge and long, and it's just ridiculous. So I really need to go back to this, because this is some of my hand spun, and I think it's going to be a beautiful cowl. So it's going to go this way. I think it's going to be beautiful, but it's a pain in the butt to knit. So I don't know, if you notice that sometimes you just aren't into a project, maybe try switching the needle and see if it has something to do with the needle and the comfort level when you're knitting it, because this knitting on this big long needle was just a pain in the butt. Such a pain in the butt that it just, you know, it distracted me from my beautiful hand spun. So I hope that's answered some questions, giving you some good information, maybe made you think about the way you select needles and if you do the same thing, or if maybe you want to try something different because of the way it might feel or the way it might affect your knitting and your kind of your happiness and your satisfaction with the project that you're knitting as you go. So let me look. Oh, I did want to say one more thing. I did type up notes this time, so I did have one thing to say about Hiya-Hias and why they're my favorite. When I want a wooden needle, it's dictated by the yarn. I have lots of wooden needles, interchangeables. Okay, so I think I've mentioned everything in my notes that I wanted. Yep, I mentioned the Lizzie. Okay, so Hiya-Hias are my favorite. This is a pair that I just got with my gift certificates from To the Loopy You. And so this is the way the Hiya-Hias come. I usually do also get a 40-inch cable, because a 40-inch cable is good for magic looping small projects like socks or hats and things like that, fingerless mitts. But it's also a good garment size where a sweater would comfortably fit on a 40-inch needle, because it's usually a little bit bigger or close to the size that you're going to be around as you're knitting it. So 40 inches normally what I go to. Oh, and they even say on the back, they even give a suggestion for how long the cable is and what to knit it for, or what to use it to knit. Ah, cool. So Hiya-Hiya, I usually get the 40-inch. I do not necessarily always get the sharps. These I think are just the Hiya-Hiya regular needle, and the point is perfectly fine. And I usually do you find that usually one side is a little pointier than the other? Doesn't this side look a little pointier than that side? Maybe not. Maybe it's the angle. It must just be the angle. But the Hiya-Hias also come with, if you can see, there's one of those little locking stitch markers. And so this was out of the pair that I just started using last week. So Hiya-Hias, they're very lightweight. They have the brushed finish to them, a very flexible cable, so they're great for lots and lots of things. And that's my needle talk. I normally use circular needles for everything. There are a couple exceptions, like for small straight projects or for lace work, where you would want something to be even and consistent in width. And that's about it. I'm not all that picky, but there definitely are different times to use different needles. So what do you think? Maybe you could tell me in the episode thread what you do, or if you agree or not. So I think that's going to be it for now. Hopefully that was enough. How long did I go? Oh, only 45 minutes. Aren't you guys lucky? Okay, so until next time, I hope your knitting makes you happy.